Alrighty, welcome back everyone. We just talked about that Penn State USC game going down in LA this upcoming weekend, and I do have Penn State winning. I think it's going to be a little bit more of a fight than some people are expecting, but I do have Penn State coming out with the win. Nicholas Singleton I have having a huge day in this game. But let's get to some Big 12 breakdowns because we have two big time games this upcoming weekend, and frankly, we have a couple more, but I'll get to why I didn't necessarily break those down in detail a little bit later, but let's go ahead and jump in here and let's get to Arizona-BYU. This is a very, very interesting game. This is what we call a classic Big 12 game, frankly, because you have a team coming off a loss like Arizona, really, really tough loss to Texas Tech last week, and then you got an undefeated team in BYU that's played really, really good football, especially at home, has been absolutely incredible. Seems like a normal game, but the reality is nothing is normal in the Big 12. I think it's one of those that BYU is in a great position to go on a little bit of a run after this one. Oklahoma State comes up to Provo after this, and then you go to UCF. I think we've proven that neither of those teams are quite as elite as we thought, so there's a real reality where they could walk into that Utah game undefeated, and frankly, Utah without Cam Rising does not necessarily inspire a lot of hope for me, but the reality is BYU has a huge opportunity in this game, and Jake Retzlaff has done just an incredible job with his offense. He has executed at a ridiculously high level, is their leading rusher as well as their leading passer, so he's an elite player in every sense of the word, and frankly, he's one of those guys that if he doesn't have a big game in this one, it could be a really, really long day for BYU, especially running the ball. He does have to be a factor with his legs, no two ways about that. And then Arizona has a chance to kind of find themselves. You know, the Big 12 is pretty wide open. Arizona does have 2 losses on the schedule, but the reality is there could be a lot of people that have 2 losses on the schedule at the end of the year, and it'll be really interesting to see if this team can kind of put something together offensively and get a lot of more guys involved, and we'll talk about that here in a second. But the reality is they're coming off a game to Texas Tech where they just kind of missed the mark a little bit, and they have to be able to get back up on that horse, go to a really tough place to play and get a win, and it's going to be a load to do. But the Arizona linebackers are going to have a lot to say about that. Ty Brown and Jacob Manu are absolutely elite in every way, and the BYU run game is a load to deal with a quarterback run game with a lot of really good running backs and an elite veteran offensive line. It's a lot to deal with. But if Arizona, those linebackers can make really good run fits, can tackle those running backs and drive them backwards, especially that quarterback, you're gonna have a good chance for success in this game. But it's gonna be an absolute fight. Cannot wait for this one. And frankly, I think it's gonna have more to say about the Big 12 going forward than we might think right now. But Keon Burnett is someone they need in this game if you're Arizona. The reality is T-Mac is absolutely incredible. He is off the charts, one of the best wide receivers in the entire country. They need more guys. And this is a tight end, but at the end of the day, he has come on over the last couple of weeks, and he very much needs to continue that this upcoming weekend because you're not going to beat this BYU team if you can't spread the ball out because this defense is too smart. They're too veteran. If you're going to key in on one guy, they're going to be able to make those plays. So you got to be able to stretch the ball out, and then obviously T-Mac's got to make his fair share of plays. And then you got Takario Davis. This is an NFL caliber player. Frankly, he might just be picked in the first round of the NFL draft. This dude is absolutely incredible, and he's going to have his hands full. Chase Roberts is really, really good on that BYU side. You also have, I'm blanking on his name, Darius. I'm blanking on his last name. Very, very good players over there for the wide receivers for BYU, and he's going to have to lock up a lot of them. He plays a little bit more of that boundary corner, so going to be really interesting to see how that kind of impacts the game. Maybe BYU just shuts off that side of the field, frankly, because this guy is absolutely terrifying to throw at. And then we got Keelan Marion, another wide receiver for BYU. This is a guy that, frankly, I think can stretch the field in a number of different ways. And when you're talking about an Arizona State backend that has a lot of talented guys, has guys that can play really good football, you're going to have to be able to stretch the field. You're going to have to be able to put this defense in a little bit of conflict, and then you can open up that run game. So maybe it's just one big play from Keelan Marion early on in this game that totally changes the way that Arizona plays this team, and maybe gives Jake Retzlaff just a little bit more room in the run game. So a huge player that maybe is not going to put up the crazy numbers, 3 touchdowns or anything wild in this game, but maybe makes one huge play in the first quarter, and it totally changes the defensive approach for Arizona. And then you got Jacob Robinson, another corner on this field, and he's going to get T-Mac. That's the reality of this situation. Whenever you play Arizona, that top corner that you have is going to be the biggest player in the game for your defense because he's going to get number 4 a ton. So it's going to be incredible to see how he kind of handles this. Obviously, plays a little bit more positionally, so it's going to be all the back end. No two ways about that, but this is a huge player, and frankly, he's going to get T-Mac a ton in this game. And then keys to the game. You have 2 very, very different styles of teams here. BYU is a little bit more of a balanced attack. Arizona's going to rip the ball all over the field. That's just who they are. They're going to do everything they can to make all the plays on the outside. And frankly, they got plenty of plays to make. No two ways about that. Then you got T-Mac against this BYU back end, a really, really good unit. And frankly, when you're playing T-Mac, you can look like a very bad unit while being very good. So it's going to be incredible to watch that. And if this back end can kind of take him out of this game, it's going to be impossible for this team to really do what they want to do. And then you got Jake Retzlaff. This is a very, very good running quarterback and one of those guys that doesn't really matter what defense you have called. He has the ability to make the right play, kind of like Diego Pavia over at Vandy, where you can have the right play call. Doesn't matter. If he makes the right decision, it's going to be a nightmare for you to deal with, and it's going to be really, really tough. I think this is a little bit of a back-and-forth game, but I like Arizona to win. I frankly think this is just kind of a Big 12 spot. I think this is a spot where you like BYU, they're rolling right along, they're playing really good football, and Arizona's sputtering just a little bit, and then they play really good football on one Saturday. That's just what the Big 12 is right at this moment, so I'm going to lean into that for the time being. I'm going to go Arizona in this game, and then we'll see what happens. If BYU wins, then they're sitting atop that conference and feel pretty good about where they sit going forward. Then we got to talk about this game, and I did have to go back to the old-time, or the classic Big 12, not the old-timey, not too far back, but the reality is, really fun game happening in Boulder, Colorado this upcoming weekend. Kansas State heads up to Boulder to face off against Colorado, and Chris Klieman has a real chance to get back into the conference play and really be kind of the team to beat going forward. Now, there are teams that will be above them in the rankings, no two ways about that, but if Kansas State wins this game, I feel pretty confident that they will be number one in the odds in the Big 12 going forward, and they might just be the team that everyone expects to win the title going forward. But it's going to be a tough battle. Colorado, this could be a moment for Colorado. Frankly, I think it's the biggest game Dion has coached while at Colorado, and if he wins, next week will be the biggest game. And then if he wins that one, the next week will be the biggest game. That's the reality of where they're at right now. When you're scaling as quickly as they are and they're playing really, really good football, you're going to have that pressure on you. No two ways about that, and I think they kind of relish that up there in Boulder. But the reality is Kansas State really stumbled out of the gate, has not necessarily played the elite football that we expected of this team. Avery Johnson has been very, very up and down, and on the road has not played very good football, so definitely something to watch there. Played downright awful against BYU. So we talked about different styles in the past game. This is much more aggressive than that one. You know, you have Colorado that is going to pass the ball. Frankly, I think it's somewhere over 60% when they pass the ball. And then Kansas State's going to run the ball a ton. That's the way they go about business. And maybe it doesn't necessarily play into the hands of Colorado quite as well as we thought, because that UCF team really liked to run the ball, and Colorado did a great job against that team. So Colorado does allow 151 on the ground per game, but this should be the best attack that they face. So maybe that goes up a little bit. And then Kansas State allows 280 through the air. This is definitely the best quarterback that they face. So it's going to be an interesting game. And I think talking about that past game, Will Sheppard has come on over the last couple of weeks, and I think he's a huge player for Colorado going forward. When you have Travis Hunter and LeJontay Wester and all of these guys, Jerlon Miller, on the outside that are going to be able to make plays, you need that big wide receiver. You need the guy that Shedeur can throw that deep ball to, and you can just go up and get it. Frankly, he went up and got one against UCF, and it was absolutely incredible. He's one of those players that can make any play you want him on the football field, and when you're tracing around Travis Hunter and LeJontay Wester and all of these speedsters, he could just be running up the sideline and catching a big-time play. So he's one of those guys that could change this game in an instant, especially against a back end for Kansas State that has not been all that great. You're going to have to make a couple of big plays, and I think Will Sheppard can very much make those. When we talk about Colorado this year, frankly, the biggest thing I've been impressed with is the defensive ends that they got in the portal. They've been absolutely incredible, and Dayon Hayes has been just an absolute great game wrecker. And he's one of those guys that when you face a team like this, we talked about it with Jake Retzlaff, the edge rushers are going to be hugely important in this game for Colorado, and it's huge that they got the guys that they did, because it's going to be a lot of read options. It's going to be a lot of Avery Johnson trying to get out on that edge, and if you can set it, if you can keep him in the pocket, you're probably going to win this game. Avery Johnson is not necessarily comfortable staying in the pocket as long as he needs to, and if you can keep him there, then you're in a really, really good position. Dylan Edwards is a fascinating player to me in this game, because I think when you look at Colorado, the way that they were able to stop UCF is we're going to stack the box, we're going to tackle what's in front of us, and we're not going to allow that big-time play, and they did a great job of that. This is a different player, and frankly, when I think about Kansas State's rushing attack compared to UCF's, it really comes down to how many dynamic playmakers Kansas State has compared to how many dynamic playmakers UCF has. Because when you look at Kansas State, the quarterback position, you have KJ Jefferson at UCF, and then you have Avery Johnson. Avery Johnson is going to be able to create more problems just by virtue of being faster, being a little bit more athletic, and being a little bit more evasive. Now, you can probably put him on his behind a little bit easier than you can KJ Jefferson. But the reality is, if you can't touch him, you can't put him on the ground. So it's going to be interesting to watch that. Also, they play a lot of off cover, or they play a lot of man coverage. Excuse me. So maybe it's Dylan Edwards just kind of getting out of the backfield, finding a little bit of a pass, and taking it 50 yards to the house for a score in this one. And then you got VJ Payne on that back end. It's not been great by any means, and those corners that should be really, really solid have not necessarily lived up to the hype. So you got to have a big-time play. You got to have that middle-of-the-field safety, that center fielder that can make a play on a ball that Shedeur Sanders throws downfield, because he's going to take his shots downfield. That's what this team does. That's who Shedeur Sanders is. So you got to take the opportunity when you get them. It's going to be really, really tough to win this game if you're not able to get at least a couple of turnovers on that back end. And VJ Payne's made a number of really good plays this year, and he's going to have to on Saturday as well. Some keys to the game. Who can force more pressure in this game? Because the reality is you have two quarterbacks that can really extend plays. You have two quarterbacks that, frankly, if you move them off the spot, they're not all that terrible. Now, Avery Johnson's probably going to run the ball a little bit more aggressively than Shedeur Sanders is, obviously. But the reality is they are very dangerous players. And it's not necessarily only about forcing pressures. It's about getting these guys on the ground, which is going to be an absolute nightmare to do. So maybe we see a lot of these off-schedule plays by these quarterbacks, and it ends up being, 45-42 at the end of the day. But the KSU run game is the other thing that I want you guys to watch. Ranked number 5th in the country, 244 yards per game. They have every ability to run the ball very effectively in this one. Now, Colorado was able to slow down the number 7 rushing attack in the country in UCF. I talked about the differences between those, and I think Kansas State can be a little bit more effective on the ground than UCF was, but that being said, Colorado's done an incredible job improving their tackling, making sure that everyone's where they need to be. And if they can do that in this game, then maybe the KSU run game can't get going the way that they need to. And then finally, Stadium Pulse is going to be a factor for every Colorado game going forward, because this is the moment. This is the moment where if they win this game, they're 5-1, probably sitting very, very high in this conference and very, very high in the odds to win this conference. And you need your crowd to be able to win this game. It's going to be a really, really tough fight, and frankly, probably be a little bit more physical than a lot of the games that you've played thus far with that Kansas State defensive line. So it's going to be a fight. No two ways about that. And I think Colorado is going to prove a lot of people wrong in this game. I think they're going to prove that they are a really good contender in this game. Now, I don't think they win in that effort. I do think it's going to be a Kansas State win, and frankly, I don't think that necessarily matters for the way that we think about Colorado going forward. I think they're going to prove that they're a big-time contender in this conference, and frankly, I think they're going to play a really good game. I just think at the end of the day, Kansas State's going to make a couple of plays. Avery Johnson's going to make a couple of plays with his legs while they're chasing around all of these wide receivers. He's going to get loose for that one play that they need, and Kansas State's going to finish this one off. But the reality is, I do think Colorado is going to be able to prove to everyone that they're a real contender in this conference, and every single team that they face is going to have to worry about them coming forward. But it's going to be an awesome game. I think both those games are going to be absolutely incredible and will definitely shape the Big 12 going forward. And we'll break down exactly why I didn't pick the Iowa State-West Virginia game here in a second. But let's take our third break here, and when we come back, we're going to get into some upsets coming up this upcoming weekend. Definitely some interesting ones, including Utah going on the road, Tennessee inviting in Florida, and Texas. Whenever you play Oklahoma, there's always that chance for an upset. So I'll break it down right after this, so stick with us.